Roll call, please.
Mr. Ballard.
Here.
Ms. Nazario. Here. Mr. Sturgill.
Here.
And Mr. Williams.
Here.
Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yes.
Our first recognition of visitors. Do we have anyone? Everybody's normal. First hearing of the public. Everybody's. We have our first hearing of the public. Usually when I say that, you're always, yeah, you give me my cue, right? Hearing none, hearing none. I need an approval of the minutes from, which meeting was this?
Last week.
July
20th.
20th.
Yep.
So moved.
Support.
Roll call?
Mr. Williams.
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill.
Yes.
Mr. Ballard.
Yes.
Ms. Nazario.
Yes.
Going into old business. Is there any old business? Hearing none. Report and recommendations of our treasurer.
I have a library resolution. It's to consider the approval of recommendation for appointment of Lorain Public Library trustee.
Thomas Drake. Need a motion?
Motion to approve?
Support.
Anything? Roll call.
Mr. Williams.
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill.
Yes.
Mr. Ballard.
Yes.
And Ms. Nazario.
Yes.
Okay. And last meeting, the board asked for a presentation to talk more about the May update, as well as the levy and the ESSER funds. So I do have a presentation prepared. Drew? This presentation will review the May forecast, levy scenarios, and ESSER funding. Starting with revenues. Our forecasted revenues are a bit higher than we originally projected in November. Looking at lines 1.01 and 1.02, we had a higher collection of property taxes during the pandemic than we expected. This is likely due to the government programs and incentives that are pandemic related. And even though the revenues from 2021 property taxes are better than expected, they are still less than fiscal years 2019 and 2020. We are also still projecting a reduced property tax collection through fiscal year 25. Looking at the comparison between November and May expenditures, our expenses also decreased in the general fund. This happened for two main reasons. One, the athletic revenues and expenses were down because of the pandemic, and two, we were able to pay for pandemic-related expenses from ESSER funds rather than from the general fund. Examples of this include sub-costs, transportation, class coverage, overtime costs, and educational supplies that were needed for virtual learning. Let's look at our imbalances. Based on our current spending, and in the anticipation of decreased revenue and increased costs, we're still looking at a $66 million deficit by the end of fiscal year 2025. The district began deficit spending in 2020. Without a new levy, we're looking at an almost $14 million deficit by fiscal year 23. Our district has not had a new money levy in 9 years. At this time, we are considering a 6.8 mil levy that will generate about $4.1 million in revenue a year for the district. The cost is just under $10 a month for a taxpayer with a property valued at $50,000. We believe this number to be realistic and respectful to our taxpayers. If this levy is passed, the district will be able to use closer to $7 million rather than $14 million of the ESSER funds to balance the deficit for fiscal year 23. This will allow the district to utilize more ESSER funds for special projects and initiatives that specifically address the achievement gaps and needs in our district. Our district is eligible to receive a total of just under $58 million from 3 rounds of ESSER allocations. We do not anticipate additional federal funding. Due to the restrictive nature of ESSER funds, this money is not a guarantee, and we cannot just put all of those funds into the general fund. Each dollar must be approved by the state prior to its use. Approval is based on the rules and guidelines set by the federal and state governments. ESSER funds are intended to help school districts safely reopen schools, measure and effectively address significant learning loss, and take other actions to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on the students and families who depend on our K-12 schools. We also have to follow maintenance of effort and maintenance of equity guidelines when utilizing ESSER funds. This requires us to spend at least the same amount or more of state and local general fund dollars from year to year. If this doesn't happen, a portion of Title, IDEA, and ESSER funds would have to be returned to the state. Let's take a closer look at our ESSER spending. We used all of the ESSER 1 allocation to help cover initial district losses in revenue from state budget cuts, as well as pay for additional costs due to the pandemic. Examples of these costs include materials and postage for curriculum mailed to students during the shutdown, adding cleaning supplies and equipment, PPE such as masks, and technology for students and staff to be able to work and learn remotely. This portion of the funding must be used by September of '23. We're using ESSER 2 to bridge the gaps between the original needs caused by the pandemic and the beginning stages of the continuity plan. This portion of the funding also must be used by September of 2023. For ESSER 3, our focus here is the continuity plan. This portion of the funding must be used by September of 2024. The state required each district to submit a continuity plan for spending ESSER funds. And our plan recognizes that all students and families in our district have been met with a wide range of academic and non-academic barriers during this unprecedented time caused by the pandemic. To address continuity of services, we will be utilizing the ESSER funds in the following ways. We plan to invest about $15 million to increase access to technology. Students will be provided with a Chromebook, staff will be provided with a MacBook, and we are exploring a partnership to be able to provide free citywide internet, helping to resolve accessibility inequities that have plagued our community for decades. We plan to invest about $3.6 million in extended learning. This includes summer camp activities, Boys and Girls Club aftercare, a Sparks program, recovery learning and engagement projects at each building, and curriculum and academic support specialists throughout the district. We plan to invest about $1.5 million to expand our arts program and extracurricular activities. We plan to invest about $2.5 million to increase our wraparound services. This includes hiring home liaisons to help students, families, and teachers address issues related to truancy, behaviors, the effects of special physical, emotional, and economic needs. We will be establishing partnerships to provide additional supports, including medical vans for dental care, vision care, and mental health supports. This also includes hiring staff to implement and oversee the wraparound services. We also plan to invest about $1 million in secondary learning continuity. This includes expanding coursework for grades 6 through 12. We will be adding staff to teach high school courses at the middle school level, which will provide students in grades 6 through 8 with learning experiences in career technical education, early college, and foreign languages. We will also be adding supports to our Success Academy alternative school so that students enrolled in this program will have access to much more robust coursework beyond English, math, and social studies. Lastly, we'll be setting aside up to $14 million for deficit spending, dependent on a combination of our financial status and government regulations.
Thank you. Any questions from the board?
No, thank you. I think it would be, I don't know if it's possible, in the very beginning of the presentation, you talked about using funds so that they kind of offset a deficit we would have had. Is there any way we can calculate what our financial situation would look like if we did not receive those COVID funds? I don't have to do it now, but it just, yeah.
Definitely.
I think it would be interesting to see, it's kind of for our residents, to see what our real financials look like Because again, I think when we have all this, the amount of money that's been placed in the economy for stimulus, COVID response, sometimes creates a picture that's not quite accurate. It's, there's a lot of money that's been put out here, and it's not designed to be sustainable. It's temporary, and so we have to really think hard when we're using temporary money to fix long-term problems. So we just don't want our community to think that we're flush with money. But again, I think to see what our situation could look like, how dire things would be had we not gotten those resources, would be a reasonable picture to see.
It's a scary, scary picture.
Anything else? I'll just add that I really appreciate the presentation. I'm not sure if we can upload that entire presentation like to our website or something like that. I know it's unusual for us to get a report like that, but as we learned last year, everything has changed. So being able to introduce technology the way you just did is very, very fascinating to me. And I think when we need to go back, you can explain it to us any time of the day, whenever we need to. So thank you for that presentation.
And also, if we do that, and I know it has a narrative, would it be possible, like in the slides, where you had the, what we're using the ESSER funds for? You gave explanation, wraparound services, and you narrated what those were. Could we place those in writing also?
We can.
So if someone's just looking at the presentation, they can still see like itemized, kind of what those are. That would be helpful for the viewer.
Thank you. You have anything else in your report?
I do have the resolution approving the submission of the tax levy for the November 2nd, 2021 election.
So moved.
Support.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Sturgill.
Yes.
Mr. Williams.
Yes.
Mr. Ballard.
Yes.
Ms. Nazario.
Yes.
Is that it?
That's it for me.
Next, we have a report and recommendations of our CEO on personnel matters.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excuse me. One of the slides Tia put up there, she was talking about one of the emphasis, what we're trying to emphasize as we transition back into our plan is extended supports, extended learning. And we have we have a lot of different moving parts going on right now, as you can imagine, as we identify many areas of need. And I'd like for our high school principal, Pat Coleman, and Coach McFarland, whoever he is out there, to come up. And what they did, Pat was working on things and ways to figure out additional supports for all of our students who need additional opportunities to get to where they need to be. And Coach McFarland was leading an initiative on how we provide the supports and resources necessary to make sure our athletes have what they need to continue to be successful. And those two plans kind of merged and melded together today in a way that I thought was pretty impressive. And I just want them to update the board on what our thoughts are, to kind of give people an idea of how we're thinking and how we're behaving and how we're focusing on our children.
Thank you. Am I broadcasting okay, audio-wise? Great. So yeah, appreciate the opportunity to share. We've had some, as you just alluded to, some energizing conversations this summer at the building level, district level, and had some great conversations this morning, really around how can we best support our kids in a time where we know our kids' needs are going to be higher than ever, coming back to what we know is going to be a traditional school year, but hopefully a new and improved traditional school year. We can't continue to do things the same way. Our kids' needs are greater than ever. So to this end, one of the things we know is that when we have our students on campus, we need to create a lot of density for them. We need a lot of density as it pertains to academic support, density as it pertains to emotional support, certainly sustenance, and density as it pertains to credit recovery opportunities. So one piece of the plan, and there's many spokes to this plan, not to get too in the weeds on that, but one piece to the plan that we're excited about is really plagiarizing a little bit from our coaches around in our athletic department around some of the great work they've done for decades here. Our coaches, our athletic department does as good a job as any group of adults in the state of Ohio in terms of creating meaningful and relevant social structures that go beyond sports, academic structures, emotional support structures. Our coaches take incredibly good care of our kids. It's my task as the principal to make that type of support, that level of support, available to all of our kids that need that. So we're planning on implementing an after-school period this fall that we're lovingly referring to at this point. Names change sometimes. Right now we're calling it our 11th period. That's based on the notion that we have a 10-period day in our bell schedule at the high school. And again, the goal is to not just mimic, but really partner with our coaches on, you know, what we all know and love to be kind of that study table experience that athletes benefit from. So for any student in need, some high levels in terms of what we're talking about. This is something that would happen multiple days per week, so it's not a one and done. We're talking about as many as 4 days per week of support. It's going to involve core teachers providing direct support. It's going to involve supplementary online curriculum. We're talking about plans to feed our kids, to make sure they get a snack between 10th and 11th period and access to a meal after 11th period. Working on coordinating transportation for our students that need that. But basically, we're going to work with our students as we identify needs. We're going to work with students to develop an 11th period academic support option. And so, again, right now it's a little bit of, it's probably more proposal and in whiteboard phase. But again, it was a really exciting conversation. We stumbled onto a lot of commonalities, Dave and I, this morning, and we appreciate the opportunity to share. We're definitely firm on the direction, firm on the concept, and excited about the potential impact. Now, I don't want to be too big of a microphone hog here. And a lot of this work is really work Dave's been doing with kids for decades. So I want to give him an opportunity to share his perspective. Dave, we know, has a certain magic about him with kids and just finding a way to support kids. And it's really my job to make sure I'm removing barriers and allowing him to do what he does. So Dave, do you want to share a little bit of our story?
Sure. So we, athletically, I'm speaking athletic, and I do agree, and I applaud the board. The gentlemen and the ladies that we've hired as coaches are outstanding, and they're excited and embracing, and they have been embracing study table with our athletes for a long time. But the vision for this fall, especially with new rules from Ohio High School going into effect, which I would like to say, I'm really happy with. I just talked to Chantel in the volleyball. I'm close with Coach Creel. You know, when you talk about eligibility, 96% of our kids are eligible. I mean, no matter, you could give them a 2.6 grade point average. We've got outstanding young people in our sports programs. But the way it's going to look for our athletic program is each coach is committed to a success plan for their athletes, because each kid is a little bit different. We've got a young person here, maybe a young lady on the volleyball team that has a 4.0. And her success plan, she'll be at study table at this 11th period as well. But her plan might be ACT prep, and it's going to look a lot different than maybe the student who's having attendance, behavioral problems, or academic problems. So, you know, we all know that each kid's so unique. There are so many great individuals, but we have to identify the why. Why is this kid struggling? Why is this kid having success? But we have to tailor a plan. So the coaches are committed to that. They're assistant coaches. I just wanted you to know they're committed to this. Pat, getting all the students up here, credit recovery up here, also allows athletes to get into credit recovery. So it's an exciting program. And I think the big piece for me that I had promised is, I guess maybe it's the biggest part of my life with my children or the teams I've coached, is accountability. You got to have some accountability. And I really am dedicated to tracking. I'm going to have a spreadsheet with every athlete this fall, every single athlete, their current grades and their attendance, their behavior, their grades, everything through the 9 weeks, so that we can look at the data. Because I think being a great leader, as you all are, is sometimes it's easy to look at the successes, but we need to look at things and see, hey, is this worthwhile or is it not worthwhile? What are we doing to make our athletes successful? Because we're all committed, every coach is committed that our kids leave, they graduate from Lorain High School with a success plan. They're going to go into HVAC, they're going to go to college, whatever it is, the military, but we have a plan and direction for our young people. So if there's any questions.
That's what we can.
So the 11th period will be offered to everybody, though, is what you're saying? Is not just the athletes, it will be, that's exciting.
Yeah, the sports coaches will have,
Their
like, we
own.
use these rooms down here. Like the general students could be in here, credit recovery could be in that computer lab for, we gotta work this out.
Yeah.
Right,
But,
yeah.
but each coach will have his team as well. Remember that the coaches have a little more, a stronger hold on the kids to
Right.
get them to come. So all the volleyball girls, all the football players, you know, and so forth, will be here. I talked to Nurse Jones, all the cheerleaders will be here.
Great.
That's part of their practice. So they'll control that group of kids. But we'll also have the general population and teachers up here. Right, I didn't mean that.
Yeah, and Courtney, what I would say is needs drive support.
Right.
So we want to identify students who need the extra
For
support and prioritize them for that 11th, our resources are endless in terms of having full staff here for 11th period. But, and we can certainly pick out kids who probably don't necessarily need to be
Need it.
spending an extra hours,
Right.
but you get the idea.
Yeah.
We'll be pretty targeted and intentional around who needs that extra layer of support, and we'll be offering that to those students. And again, if there's someone outside that realm that, wants to be a part of it, we can have conversations about that.
That's great. Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else? I'll only add, I've gotten a little more involved with football and the fall sports than normal because we've got an exceptional year that's coming at us. And it almost, with the team that you guys have assembled, it almost makes me wish I was back in high school playing sports because, our head football coach, when he got word, started listening to what some of our players were going through, he actually shut down practice and those other things to say, no, we're getting around the table. We're going to focus on education first. That's a big deal coming from a coach. And as this is wrapped around Coach McFarland, I mean, everyone knows the legend that you are in this community, and to really see the love and care that they give to our student athletes, it's amazing to see what you guys are doing. And then to expand it to all of our students is amazing. So I just personally say thanks for caring as much as you guys do, all of you. Thank
I would
you.
like to add about that spring study. That wasn't because children were failing. That was because they weren't meeting our standards, which is academically ready to go to college. That was because we had a student that had a 68%, maybe we'd get him to a 70. We had a kid with an 85%, maybe we'd get him to 90%. And I just wanted to make sure, because when that first came out, some people thought, oh, all those kids. No, the perception's always wrong. We have awesome kids, and Creel is a high-character guy, and I agree 100%. He's like, wait a minute, he's treating him like his son. You got a 78%? That's ridiculous. Let's get that, how do we get that to 80%? And I was really proud of that as well, because it was more than just, obviously it was for every athlete in the football program, but it was really about getting everybody to A's and really being academically excellent. So I do applaud that.
Outstanding.
To amplify that, yeah, Coach Carrillo, I think, to do that has helped change the conversation a little bit around needing to be more about more than eligibility, but about standards.
Right.
Absolutely. Thank you, gentlemen.
And just to kind of tell a little bit more about the story, excuse me, I got a call from Coach McFarland many months ago saying, Jeff, I got some ideas I want to talk to you about. And we got together and I said, okay, Coach, before you say a word, the answer is yes. So he sat down and he walked through pretty much what he just described. And then what I saw today, again, Pat mentioned that we don't have a lot of the details worked out yet. I was watching this go in a meeting we had earlier today and just amazed. Again, you talk about leadership, you talk about the people you want taking care of your children. I just want to say thanks. And I'm excited to see how this thing turns out. And again, I know it's not a COVID-specific thing. It's the right thing to do, and it's something we need to continue to do. So just, again, thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, I'd like the board to consider for approval items 9.01 to 9.12, personnel matters.
So moved.
Second?
Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Sturgill.
Yes.
Mrs. Zario.
Yes.
Mr. Ballard.
Yes.
And Mr. Williams.
Yes.
I'd like the board to consider for approval items 10.01 to 10.03.
Yes. Or approve.
Support.
We have a motion and
Sorry.
support. Any discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Zario.
Yes.
Mr. Williams.
Yes.
Mr. Ballard.
Yes.
And Mr. Sturgill.
Yes.
I'd like the board to consider for approval item 10.04.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Sturgill.
Yes.
Ms. Nazario.
Yes.
Mr. Ballard.
Yes.
And Mr. Williams.
Abstain.
I'd like the board to consider for approval items 10.05 to 10.27.
So moved.
Support.
Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Sturgill.
Yes.
Mr. Williams.
Yes.
Mr. Ballard.
Yes.
And Ms. Nazario.
Yes.
And that is all I have for you, Mr. President.
Outstanding. I gotta find where I'm at in this whole mess of papers that I have.
Board docs makes more sense.
Yeah. Where am I in this world? Help me.
I don't know, I'm getting there
You
too.
are on
20
9. Just finished nice.
Yeah,
Page
Right.
22.
Thank you.
Board's recommendations.
Yep. We already got reports and recommendations of the CEO. You're done, right?
Yep.
Jeff? All right, so next is there any new business?
Yes, there is. Obviously, there are a lot of changes with COVID and the expectations and behaviors that we need to expect in school. And candidly, those rules are kind of coming out daily. And I know that if you asked me this question yesterday, I can answer it, but I am guessing if something's changed since yesterday, I'd be willing to bet there has. I know Ross has been in close contact with our health department. And I just want to make sure people know what's going on today, but also to expect changes soon. We have a meeting tomorrow morning with our health commissioner, and we'll get updates then, but I think they're even looking into next week before things are finalized.
Yeah, so the short of it is obviously the landscape's changed here in the last few weeks. And so the CDC came out with their recommendations. 14 days later, they adjusted their recommendations this week. The Ohio Department of Health has adjusted their recommendations on Tuesday. And part of that trickle down now is that the local health departments have leeway then to put together their recommendations. So our health department met Tuesday afternoon. They're meeting again this afternoon. They're going to have recommendations for us, they said beginning of next week, based on our specific data. So it is a changing landscape that we're in right now, and we're going to have to prepare to react to it.
But the question we get asked the most often is about masks. And again, this could change, but based on where we stand today, and again, unless it's changed since yesterday, for anyone over the age of 12, they recommend wearing masks if you are not vaccinated. Everyone 11 and under, because you can't be vaccinated, recommend wearing masks. And again, we'll err on the side of keeping people safe throughout the process.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll be coming to the board as soon as everything is known,
Yep.
to let you know what they're saying is the safest way to operate.
And I'd just say to our families out there and our teachers, our staff, our students, is anticipate change. And our change isn't based on ideology and politics. And so I think what's happening a lot of times, we're finding folks, because it keeps changing, they think that there's something driving the change other than the science of the virus. And we don't like all the changes, but we expect them, we anticipate them. And so I think that's the patience we have to exercise, and then not say, well, you just said this last week, you're going to say something else next week. Expect that from week to week, month to month, things could be different. And we just have to make sure that we're keeping everyone safe and using the best accurate information we have at the time.
Thank you. Yeah.
So my question would be, we've learned a lot over the last year and a half, and the virus seems to be picking up a whole new wave with this variation that's going out right now. Are we still prepared, and what are our systems? They used to call them calamity days. I guess they still call them calamity days, but it doesn't just have to be a snowstorm at this point. Is there do we have a system in place that at a drop of a day, we can tell people to go virtual versus coming into our buildings because the virus may be different and fluctuate on us? Do we have a plan for that?
I'm not sure if the plan we have would turn out a day. And I'm looking at Drew now because we have a bunch of Chromebooks coming, but I think that we just heard that maybe they're delayed. So for student devices, there may be a holdup at the very beginning of the year.
For a few days.
For a few days.
That's they're doing their best. There is a very widespread shortage of components, so districts buying Chromebooks and laptops, even iPads and other tablets, all over the country are facing shortages.
So we were made promises early on that may not necessarily come to fruition, so we may be a little delayed on some of those things. So we will have a plan in place.
So my practical response to that would be, we had product this past year that we let the kids use. Do we still have access to those, or do we trade those in, or do the kids still have those? Did they all turn them in at the end of the year?
Most of the kids have them, I do believe.
Many of the students still have them. Some are turned in. Many of them are usable, but I'm talking about several days. And strategically, pardon me, what we've already received would go to those students that are in classes that would be immediately using them, whereas in the earlier grades that aren't using computers every day, those are the classes that could still hold off for a couple days until they arrive.
But very shortly after the start of the school year, we can implement a plan.
Yeah, the vendor that won the RFP is working very diligently to make sure they do get here by our drop dead date, which was August 13th. And I'm awaiting an update from them today. We're going to be talking later this evening, so I'll be able to provide more information after that.
I just think it doesn't, let's not lose everything that we've gained and being able to kind of flow between those
Yep.
two worlds of virtualness now.
And I think the other question, and it sounds like, just for clarity, we may have some technical issues with providing devices, but the question I think also is, do we have a plan in place to execute, absent of those pieces we can't control, that would allow us to turn the key and be virtual? In terms of,
We will have a plan in place.
okay, so that's all right, good.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, and I was going to say too, just from a mitigation standpoint, a few things here. The first is that we're ready to contact trace immediately. So if we need to contact trace and the health department lets us know that we're going to need to do that, we're ready to do that. We talked with a person from the Ohio Department of Health earlier this week. If we need to COVID test again, we can do that. Ohio is part of a 16-state consortium based on federal funding, and actually, if we needed to, we could do it, and we would use federal funding to do it. We would not have to pay for COVID testing. So if we needed to do that. And then the third thing that we've seen, and we actually with our partnership with CASE and the Health Department of Mercy Hospital, there's very little evidence of school-based transmission when mitigation practices are followed. So when masks are worn, and that seems to be the biggest one. Ohio State study earlier back in the January period when cases were the highest showed that there really wasn't a difference between 3 feet and 6 feet for transmission as long as students wore their masks. So we can very quickly ramp up our mitigation practices without missing a beat and get kids in a safe fashion and minimize spread. It really eliminates spread as long as we're really tight on our masking for those that haven't been vaccinated. The last thing is we are still partnering with the health department for vaccines. So we'll be talking with them about getting a vaccination clinic here again in the next couple of weeks. It's still the most effective intervention of all the interventions is vaccination. And so for those that are 12 and above, I think we ended up with 12 or 14 clinics in the spring. We'll do another clinic or two for students and try to make those accessible as we possibly can to get as many folks vaccinated as possible.
And I think another question that we've asked among ourselves, we know that we went from a virtual to a hybrid to fully in person, and there are still some individuals out there, perhaps students, families, who because of potential compromised immune systems or whatever reasons might not desire to be in-person learning. Are we able to accommodate those? Is that a person-by-person basis, or is that absolutely something that we don't anticipate being able to address?
I would say that we're not ready to do that today. We've gotten some advice that maybe we should put something together to make sure as the Delta strain, as Mr. Ballard mentioned, continues to barrel on. So we need to look at things differently. And again, I think that when we were put in this situation last year, again, I just standing ovation to our staff for being able to implement what we did and do it as well as we could. But we also learned some things there too, that there are better ways to do it. So we're working on that as well.
Again, I just think that we want our families to know that we're looking at every scenario and we're not dismissing things for reasons other than they're not practical or whatever. But I know there are going to be some folks, and I think for them, there are some individual families who coming back isn't an option. And if that's their case, then at a certain stage, if they know we're not going to be able to provide that opportunity, they should be looking at how they do that. And I just think it's reasonable that people get as big of a heads up as they can. And at some date sensitive where we know we're not going to be able to, for their first semester, support that kind of learning, we should let those folks know so that they can address their needs with as big of a opportunity for choice as they can. So.
Yeah, agreed.
Thanks. That was.
So more information soon.
Yeah.
Is that it? You're done with that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Committee reports, none. We have our next hearing of the public. The microphone is open. So seeing or hearing none, again, I'd like to invite the community out on Sunday between 2 and 7. I'll let you make this statement because you know all the background of the party.
I got it. All right,
Yes,
so
sir.
on Tuesday, August 1st, we have a community celebration in partnership with the city.
Sunday.
I'm sorry, what'd I say?
Tuesday.
It's Tuesday? I'm sorry, Sunday. Sunday the 1st. We have a, 2 o'clock, yeah, from 2 to 7. We have a community celebration partnering with the city and many other organizations. We'll have all kinds of fun stuff there for everybody. There'll be a free meal, hamburgers, hot dogs, chips, cookie, cotton candy, popcorn. There'll be carnival games, bouncy games, bands playing throughout the course of the day. What am I missing? Each school will be bringing academic activities specific to the age groups that they serve. So it's just a great event at Black River Landing. The parade starts at the old Morning Journal building, and we'll have a parade that leads to Black River Landing. And trailing that parade will be a bunch of kids on bikes. So it'll be a good time for everybody.
Outstanding, outstanding. Anything else for the good order from the board? Or before I close the hearing of the public, one last chance? All righty. So our next scheduled school board meeting will be August 3rd. Will that one be at 3 o'clock as well? Or is that back at 5 o'clock? I see 3 o'clock there.
No, we have 5 o'clock.
I'm sorry, I'm looking in the wrong area. 5 o'clock on the 3rd of August here. And I do believe we need to go into an executive session today for letter D, which is our negotiations. And we will not be making any votes or anything when we come out. So for those of you who have attended, thank you for coming. You can still wait until we come out if you'd like to talk with us. But I need a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Support.
Discussion, roll call.
Mr. Sturgill.
Yes.
Mr. Williams.
Yes.
Mr. Ballard.
Yes,
And Ms. Nazario.
Yes.
thank you. We'll see you all very soon.
See y'all Sunday.